Over 7 million different animals inhabit our planet.
Behavior part of reading about poison dart frogs and learning they're actually considered very intelligent for an amphibian,
right.
type.
What can they teach us?
And here I am in my 30s, PhD, thinking I know all about animals, and I pick up this toad and it peed all over me.
Oh, that's so funny. My 3-year-old son even knows that, Chris.
Yes, so.
Many species are in crisis and need your help.
They estimate close to 130 have gone extinct already.
130?
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, 130.
Oh my word.
And 400 are endangered or reaching extinction. If you go to Central America...
Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.
So welcome to the All Creatures Podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Angie.
And so Angie, welcome. And today we're going to talk about poison dart frogs, something totally new.
Yes, I learned a lot. I knew a little bit about frogs going into this, as I used to take care of them at the zoo, but learning about poison dart frogs specifically has been really fun.
No, it has, and it's, I think it's one of the things that's exciting for us is that we get to build upon our own knowledge. That
yes.
we have some knowledge on some of these species, but each week you and I are really jumping into scientific literature and everything we can find about this to talk about.
Yeah, and once again, just like science, the more answers I find, the more questions I have.
Right,
especially about, for me, their behavior or the
right.
reproductive life cycle.
Right. And I know
very interesting.
We're both animal physiologists, but we focus mainly on mammals, mammalian physiology. So jumping into amphibians.
Yes, a little bit out of my comfort zone.
Yes, but it's pretty awesome. Like I learned so much about this species this week. I think the first thing is why amphibians, right?
Right.
Like, why do we care about frogs? Why should we care about frogs?
We should definitely care about frogs.
Right. And I think, I talked a little bit about this in the first episode where I'm talking about the Earth's sixth mass extinction. And really, amphibians is the canary in the coal mine, right? You even mentioned that to me a couple times this week, talking about frog species.
Yeah, I think they represent what's going on with the environment, what's going on with the climate, because they're so sensitive.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what scientists are picking up. Mm-hmm. And when they look at the biodiversity across all taxa, I guess, if you're looking at mammals and fish and crustaceans and reptiles, amphibians are the ones that are suffering the most.
Yes, definitely most in decline. A lot of extinction going on and a lot of near threatened or endangered species across.
Or extinct.
Definitely
or
extinct.
And that's just the species we know of.
Right.
Because there's thousands of amphibians we don't know of that we have yet to discover that we may never discover because they go extinct. Right now, the IUCN, who we've talked a little bit about before in previous episodes, they are estimating a little bit less than half, but almost half of the 6,000 amphibian species are endangered right now or threatened with extinction. Which is
scary.
That's really scary. I mean, I know mammals, it's 20-something%. We're getting in that range where it's a little scary for mammals, but amphibians, where almost half of them are faced with extinction. Again, canary in the coal mine, this is scary.
Right, and I think that we forget. Not that we forget about them, but they definitely don't get a lot of the glory as the big megafauna or the big mammals. And that's a shame because, like you said, they're going extinct at a much faster rate.
Right. And then, talking about the tree of life, they're a major, supporting branch of the tree of life. And if you cut that branch away, the tree's going to die.
Right. Do we want more mosquitoes? I don't think so.
Yeah, no. God, get rid of it. Especially here in Florida. They've been really bad lately. So that kind of brings us to our species of focus this week, and that's the poison dart frogs, which are awesome. They're beautiful, beautiful frogs. They just, anytime I've seen these
they're
in
flamboyant.
Exhibits, yes. I mean, they're just so pretty. They're just such a pretty animal.
It's Mother Nature's work at its finest.
Right. And this is the one frog that you look like somebody painted them. Mm-hmm. Like just all the vibrant colors that they have.
Neon colors, right. Different patterns.
Right. And they're called, so that whole coloration and then toxicity, because they're poisonous, is called aposematic. Big word. And it's a new one in my vocabulary this week. I may have heard it before, but now I really know what aposematic is. And that is basically saying that the coloration means don't come near me, I'm toxic, you're going to die.
Yeah, it's like a warning flag.
Exactly. Which is weird because then I think like, there's berries in the wild that are colored and, well, we shouldn't eat them because they're poisonous. But then yet strawberries are red and beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like I love strawberries.
But to your analogy, your analogy, not all poison dart frogs are actually poisonous.
That's true. It's more of a warning. Hey, if you eat me, you might die.
Right.
You don't know. The interesting thing about the poison dart frogs, again, they're one of the species that are one of the canaries in the coal mine. Many of them are endangered. Some of them are probably extinct that we don't know about, but due to all of the pressures of habitat loss, climate change, the overexploitation of rainforests that scientists have now said in the last 20 years, they are really suffering bad in Central and South America where these frogs are from. So there's a fungus that is actually deadly to amphibians that is just wiping out populations.
Right, and the poison dart frogs are super susceptible.
Right, that's what they're saying. So it's a big word. It's
a fungus.
Yeah, it's a fungus.
a fungus among us.
Yeah, it's a big one. So and some scientists are saying because of climate change, things are warming up, so the fungus is able to proliferate and then wipe out some of these frogs. So really, it's kind of scary for them. And again, just kind of setting the base on why we care about this particular
little
species.
Beautiful poison frogs.
Right. So I'm going to show you two pictures. And I'm showing Angie a picture of kind of a red, black, polka dotted, a green with black polka dotted frog, and then this bright, bright red frog. And if I asked you, you were forced to eat one without cheating, looking, which one would you not want to eat? What's your instinct? You're looking at them, you're like, okay, I got to eat one. It's either take the red pill or this green pill. Which one are you going to take?
I would take the blue pill.
The blue pill, yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I probably would stay away from red.
Right.
Because red means like warning.
Right. That's what I thought. Like if I had to lick one, I would lick the green one, because I'm like, okay, that one looks less dangerous than this one that's bright red. And according to the study, it's this green one is more toxic, more poisonous.
Like Kermit?
Yeah, like it is. It really is. And I'll put those in the show notes, to show the differences. So looking at the scientific evidence of these frogs, and it's really, it depends on the subspecies, because some of them that have the more vibrant red coloration, you would think is the more toxic one. And that's what a lot of scientists have predicted. And they've actually, they have done studies that have gone out and have actually found that the brighter the color, the more vibrant the color, the more poisonous they are. But then there's a couple conflicting studies that show, these other ones that hide better, that are less conspicuous, that can blend in well, sometimes are more poisonous than, say, the bright red one. Again, that kind of gets back to what you were saying in the beginning with these frogs. The toxicity varies in the species, in the over 250 species of poison dart frogs. Some of them aren't poisonous. Some of them are really toxic and poisonous that will kill you dead. And then there's a bunch in between. And the coloration doesn't necessarily always mean toxicity levels.
So it's best to stay away from all
yes,
of them.
Don't even lick one. Don't
lick any.
Yeah, they are so
Take
cute.
home
though.
message
Yeah.
of the day, kids.
Yeah. So they, again, and that just kind of highlights what we don't know.
Right. There's a lot we don't know.
There's a lot we don't know. And these things aren't easy to study.
No.
Out in really
dense forests.
Forests, right. And they're small, we'll get to that. So I think one of my first questions is, why are they toxic? What gives them why are these poisonous frogs? And really what it is their diet, right? That's the prevailing theory, is that they're, and we're going to get into the nutrition.
You are what you eat.
Yes, exactly. So they are leaf littered. So they're down on the forest floor eating particular insects that gives them their toxicity. Now, we don't know exactly how yet they produce the poisons, but they do know that they do come from the diet, because when we bring them to captivity,
they don't have any poison.
Right.
So, not those that are born in captivity do not produce any poison.
Right.
Those that have maybe been wild caught and then brought into captivity, they're not really sure how long, but they think it can take up to a couple years for them to detoxify themselves,
right.
as this toxin stays within their skin cells for a long time, and they can actually accumulate a lot of it over time because they're not consistently releasing it. They only usually release it if they're under stress,
right, or feel they're in danger,
or feel they're endangered.
Right. And so these toxins are alkaloid toxins, very, very toxic to us. Now, I think one thing that I was kind of interested in too is the difference between a poisonous animal and a venomous animal.
Yeah, these are concepts you don't think until you really look deep into it. You may not know the difference. But
Right.
It made sense to me when I learned what the answer was.
Right. So the poisonous is you really have to eat them or lick them, or maybe even sometimes handle them because our skin is an organ. Our skin absorbs things. And then that poison will get into your system and can end up killing you. Where venomous animals are ones that have some sort of delivery mechanism, which we typically think of venomous snakes with the fangs, especially here in Florida. We got copperheads and all these things that can kill you with their venom. There are other species too in the oceans and stuff that have spines or spikes.
A delivery method.
Right. They can deliver venom there. So these frogs are poisonous. They don't deliver venom or poison. You have to actually eat them or handle them in your mouth.
Come in contact with them.
Right. To get that poison. So a lot of this aposematic is these frogs have adapted to warn predators to stay away. So mainly with these animals is birds. And so a lot of the research has looked at aposematic and how birds see color. And I never really thought that, animals, I don't know, maybe it was just growing up, but we always thought like animals saw in black and white.
Well, it might not be growing up. I think that's what researchers really thought, but now they're able to do a lot better studies and prove that a lot of animals not only do they see in some color, one or two variations, dichromatic color, but some see in similar to how we see.
Broad spectrum. There was a study we actually did last year in that class I teach, the research methods course, that was looking at the Galapagos tortoises. I don't know if I've talked to you about this or not. If you had to predict, so when they were placing food with the tortoises and trying to get either color or shape to them to affiliate the food with, or to associate the food with, which one do you think the tortoises would be more gravitate towards, a color preference or a shape preference?
Well, I worked with tortoises a lot.
So
they're some of my favorites. But my guess would be color.
Yeah, it was. Okay. I thought it was shape. Like they thought, they would see
love
circles.
Berries and grapes.
Yeah, they can see. That's what we assumed in this. It was a small study, but they actually looked at preferences of either a shape or a color, and they always gravitated towards their color.
They're looking for those strawberries.
Right, and I was like, you proved. I mean, I'm sure somebody already knew this, but you proved tortoises can see in color.
Yeah.
So it was a really cool little study that the students did, and I was really excited for the results. Just some quick facts, because again, we don't know a lot about amphibians, you and I, and some other people probably don't. Frog evolution, how the heck these animals evolved. They have been around forever.
Are they like kind of hopping dinosaurs?
Yeah, I mean, cool. 300 million years frogs have evolved. Wow. They, through all the mass extinctions, there's some of these frogs have survived.
So let's us humans not wipe them out.
Yeah, exactly. Jeez. Yeah, that would be horrible. One of the theories on frog evolution is having them exploding after the last fifth mass extinction, that they've been around, but it was really once the dinosaurs went away with T-Rex that they really exploded their population and the species variation came around. And there's really 3 lineages of frogs. They've done a lot of DNA testing to look at that. And, obviously the poison dart frogs fall under one of those. So actually they discovered the poison dart frogs in 1787. And that was the first species for them to find them in the rainforests of South America. They estimate there's over 250 different species that we kind of know about now. And then who knows how many more there are out there that we haven't found yet.
Or there were.
Right, or there were. That's right. That's a good point, too, that could be extinct. So again, these animals, they live all over South America, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, Peru, up through Central America. So pretty wide, huge territories that these animals are in.
Are they always in forest, or are they found in grasslands or in the mountains?
Completely varies. They're on the coast, down in rivers, up in the highlands, Right, they're everywhere. They're all over.
Very diverse.
Right, they're not specific to one certain type of environment. So they're all over the place in Central and South America. So yeah, it's a good question. It's a really good question. And again, we talked about their toxicity. Some of them are very toxic versus others that aren't. So Angie, these frogs are really cool because they're diurnal.
Yeah, I was reading that and I was really fascinated because I always take my boys for walks here in the evening or nighttime here in Central Florida. And we love listening to the chorus, the beautiful music that our local frogs make, and a few invasive species. That's a different subject for a different day.
Frog, right?
Yeah, a different subject for a different day. But we love identifying them through their calls, and this is always at nighttime. But these poison dart frogs are singing their songs and doing their dance and hunting and whatnot during the day.
Right. Yeah, you would think most amphibians or frogs are nighttime, but these ones actually, they're active during the day, and then, like us, they're sleeping at night. So really cool little behavior, I'm sure you're going to talk about. Now, what's really cool about digging into some of the research about their poison, these lipophilic alkaloids. So we know lipo for us geeky scientists is fat. Right?
Well, most people can relate to this because lipophilic means fat loving.
Yes.
And who doesn't love a donut?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So these poisons like fat, I guess. But what's really interesting about the alkaloid poisons is we're doing a lot of research on them, and some of them are obviously very poisonous in how they interact with us. But then they're using them for human medicine.
Sure. They're a similar family to what's found in morphine.
Like some of the things they're looking at is with muscle diseases. Some of these toxins might be really helpful there. Or nicotine. People that, are really addicted to nicotine, tobacco, that they can use some of these to block those receptors so they can get over their addiction.
Right, but it is a slippery slope. I was reading about one of the toxins they isolated, and it was super hopeful, and I think it actually got past phase 2 FDA trials. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, the therapeutic dose was too close to the lethal dose.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I don't want to be on that trial.
So, I mean, it was working wonders as far as pain, pain reduction, and I think anti-inflammation.
Right.
But yeah, it was too close for comfort.
Right. So yeah, here you go. Let's try this trial.
But
and
I think
half your patients die.
But this all points to the fact of what you mentioned before. There's so much we don't know. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a few of the toxic compounds that they've isolated from a few of these frogs. Mm-hmm. And there's hundreds of them out there. And so the potential for therapeutic or medicinal purposes that could actually benefit humans, I think, is another vote in favor of trying to save these guys.
Right. It is. It's the rainforests, the cures, the things that are possibly in there, as well as some of the deadly, stuff that comes out like Ebola out of Africa. But yeah, I mean, it's like, the species, we can learn so much, and then we can use them to our benefit to an extent where they're preserved in nature, but also ones in captivity. Maybe we can isolate some of these toxins and learn about them and how they work.
Yeah, here's a species that actually does produce potentially medicinal benefit to us humans. Right. Unlike the rhinos,
there's none.
Yeah,
there's
the rhino horn that people are after is just goofy because there's no medicinal value in that.
Right.
So a little bit different today. And
again, I would say don't eat a poison dart frog.
Or lick.
Yeah, or lick.
Take home message, kids and adults.
Yes, do not throw them in your mouth thinking you're going to heal something. It's actually, they isolate these compounds. Again, analytical chemistry, Angie's favorite topic.
It is exciting.
Right. But let's talk about, some of the history of these guys with, how they've been used.
Well, the history with humans, of course, dates way back. Historically, they've been a cultural symbol for many centuries, and different cultures idealize them or use them in myths differently. Egypt, frogs actually symbolize fertility. Mm-hmm. And in Japan, they symbolize luck. For Native American cultures here locally, they're often related to the rain gods. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for instance, currently, my son, I know your boys, they love modern day Kermit the Frog. Right. So there's still, even in pop culture, there's still this fascination with these beautiful and unique creatures. But looking even back a little more historically, one of the reasons they got their names, dart frogs, they're also called poison arrow frogs sometimes. But the reason they got this name dart frog is because the indigenous people in the Amazon basin, who are way wiser than us with a lot of these medicinal values of different animals and plants, but they would make their spears to hunt with, and they would dip their spear tip into some of the secretions that they were able to isolate from the frogs, and those become blow darts, and which once again very toxic if they're hunting some kind of indigenous animal, and that's where the nickname
the poison dart frog
dart
came
frog.
From, right?
Even though we know not all of them are poisonous, they kind of got this catch-all name. And then also more recently, they have, like you mentioned, they have been used for potential medicinal purposes, and that's just starting. We're just at the very early stages of that, so that's really exciting with our and potentially with the benefits that they could offer us.
Right, and like going back to them using them as darts, right? The poison and reading up some of that, and actually I remember seeing some of the videos that they've showed them how they use these frogs. They know which ones are the most toxic. They don't touch them. They don't mess with them.
No.
They actually hold them in like a special container. And then, like you said earlier, get them a little bit stressed. They secrete the toxin. They dip their darts in there. And then they use them as blow darts to get primates, monkeys and stuff in the jungles for food. And this poison is so toxic that it kills the monkeys or knocks them out. Sure.
And from what researchers can tell, of course, just of what we know minimally, is that the poison can stay. These darts are good for up to 2 years.
Right.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
And then lastly, our relationship with frogs has, I'm sure everybody knows somebody who's had a pet frog, whether it's something they caught or rescued in the wild, or to some of the hobbyists, the herpers out there of the world that enjoy having amphibians or reptiles as pets. And so that has also become popular in the commercial pet trade.
Right. You said the herpers, so herpetology.
Yes, I'm using zoo lingo. Yes. I'm using zoo lingo.
So the people are like, "What's a herper?"
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't sound. It is a flattering name if if you're in the industry.
Right. So herpetology study. That's amphibians, right?
Yeah. So a lot of in the zoo, a lot of times people will specialize in working with reptiles and amphibians. Yeah, because that should be brought up too. That for one, my take-home message to any listener out there is you do not want a reptile or an amphibian for a pet,
right? In
general, because they are some of the hardest pets to keep,
right?
And a lot of kids ask their parents for a dog, and mom and dad say no because I'm going to have to walk it. Well, walking a dog is pretty easy to take care of compared to taking care of a reptile or an amphibian, because although they maybe don't eat a lot, you don't have to take them for walks, they are very sensitive, which we touched on earlier, so they need special lighting, special heat sources, special moisture, humidity control, specialty foods that you just can't go, I guess now you could probably get a lot of their food at PetSmart. But not only is it not an easy task to undertake, it can be very expensive.
It is expensive
to do it right. And so...
And I know a lot of I've worked with some people that do rescues, and a lot of people, they take on these pets and then they can't handle it. It's like, oh, this is too much.
Yeah, and I've been blessed working at the zoos. I worked with just very diverse taxa across the board, and I have to say the biggest learning curve I had was when even bigger than working with birds, because birds are also very tough to take care of. But yeah, my biggest learning curve was definitely in the herp house. So I'm using the lingo again, but working with the amphibians and reptiles. Right. So it's not for the faint-hearted. My take-home message, I have lots of them today, but my biggest one is if you do have interest, or you think you have interest in bringing home an amphibian or a reptile, think twice, do your research, and then also make sure that a species of frog, reptile that you do get is not one of the endangered ones.
Or wild-caught.
Or wild-caught, exactly. Yeah, nobody would want a wild-caught poison dart frog, because that would be bad news. Bad news bears.
No, and I think... They are awesome if you're prepared to take care of them, and there's a lot of people out there that do have reptiles and amphibians as pets, and they're awesome owners. They know what they're doing. I talked to a bunch of students that have taken care of them. Like I said, the ones that do rescues. So there are people out there that know what they're doing, and you can become one of those. But again, like you said, do your research, know what you're getting yourself into.
Sure. And in a captive setting, of course, the professional zookeepers are a really good source, too, to learn more about how to take care of them, or they can give you some of the trials and tribulations on what you should do and how you should do it.
All right, so back to more some of the geeky science part, and that's the amphibian life cycle. Like, it is... I love biology, and obviously I've dedicated my life to learning about animal physiology. I think amphibians really demonstrate why biology is amazing. It's an amazing field. And that's basically, you take this egg, and I know we know a lot about reproductive biology in mammals and how this happens in the uterus and blah, 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 blah. Frogs, lay these eggs, then these eggs hatch. They become little fish, right?
Yep.
They look like fish.
Swimming in some water.
Right, the tadpoles. They're breathing through gills, and then all of a sudden they get arms and legs popping out, and then their gills gravitate to lungs, and then they hop out of the water, and they're like, hey, I'm going to live on water now. And that is insane if you think about it. Like, all this stuff's going on around us, and we never really pay attention and go, how amazing is this?
Yeah, and how is this happening?
Right, because we're geeks, right? We're science geeks. So we always are asking how. How and why. Why does this happen? How does this happen?
Like, why? I mean, because I still have that same gene in my body
to become a frog. You do.
Right, to grow some extra legs or yeah. So
yeah, people don't know Angie has like 4 legs. Yeah.
but
I know what you mean.
But that gene's turned off,
right.
Thank gosh. Or not being used.
Right.
But man, what a unique life cycle.
It is. It's really, and it happens within like 2 months.
Sure.
That whole process transformation happens quickly. And I know early on in like reproductive biology, we all are kind of the same. Early on, most of mammals, we all kind of look the same until we kind of differentiate into humans and chimpanzees and horses and elephants and all that stuff. Frogs, this is all happening in water.
Right.
Right. So, the tadpoles, things like that. And really the hormones, they've learned some because, like you said, how this happens. So thyroxine is a hormone. It's a thyroid hormone that helps some of this metamorphosis. And then the one I found was prolactin, which I thought was really cool because that's like the controls that slows it down. And we know that as animal physiologists, as far as, mammary gland development.
Yeah, you think of prolactin and you think of milk.
Yeah, like dairy cows.
Pretty much end of story.
Yeah.
Even though we're finding out in both animal models and human models that prolactin does a lot of other things.
Yeah, not just what we initially thought with milk. So do you know the difference between a frog and a toad?
Interesting you should ask. Instinctually, I was thinking about it and I couldn't really come up with maybe 1 or 2 things. I came up with the toads. I feel like I see those more on the ground, and they have bumps on them, or quote unquote warts.
Yeah.
Right? As a kid, don't touch them; you'll get warts.
Yeah, which isn't true.
That's a myth. Yes. Other than that, I couldn't really come up with much, so I used friendly Google to learn a little bit more. Which is, I like to consider myself an animal expert, but yeah, I learned a lot.
Right.
There's a lot of differences.
Right.
They're subtle.
Right.
They are subtle, but there are definitely some differences.
Pretty similar. I mean, they're not a huge difference, but I think some of the things that I've learned about frogs versus toads, frogs have moist skin, and which is important because they actually breathe through their skin. Not only do they have lungs, but we're talking about, the changes in the metamorphosis from gills to lungs, but they also breathe through their skin, gas exchange, getting oxygen from the atmosphere, and then versus the toad skin that's more dry and bumpy.
And I think there's some differences in their legs, too.
Right. Frogs have longer, stronger legs. They can leap farther, where toads kind of hop along the ground.
That's why as a kid you can catch a toad.
Right.
And good luck with a frog.
I can tell you a funny story. My mother-in-law would laugh about this, and I didn't know that toads pee.
Oh, yeah.
But so when I was in Texas, I picked up this toad. I'm like, oh my God, look at this thing. And I picked it up and it peed all over me. And here I am in my 30s, PhD, thinking I know all about animals, and I pick up this toad and it peed all over me.
Oh, that's so funny. My 3-year-old son even knows that, Chris.
Yes. So, yeah.
You must have grown up in the city and not catch toads.
I grew up on the beach in California.
So not too many toads.
Not many toads out there, but my mother-in-law loves to rib me about that one.
Interesting fact, some of my fellow wildlife endocrinologists, of course, are fascinated by hormones and learning about them in all different species. And one of the ways they can learn about the hormones in frogs and toads is through their urine. And that is actually one of the ways that they collect urine is by picking them up. By picking them up.
So, warning out there to the listeners, if you pick up a toad, it will pee on you. It's a defense mechanism, right?
Sure.
That they do that to flee predators, and you bite them and you get this mouthful of pee, which is nasty.
Well, and I also was reading that toads have more of a bitter taste in general to predators than a common frog.
Oh, okay. I was like, I'm not going to find that out.
Yeah, not the poison frogs.
Right.
But just in general, sometimes they're able to ward off predators better because they just
taste bad.
Right, they're not poisonous. They just don't taste good.
They taste nasty. Yeah, and then they pee in
and
then they pee on you.
Maybe that's what's tasting bad. I don't know.
It's one of the things. So the life cycle, again, it's just so amazing. And if we go more into the poison dart frogs, a lot of the females are going to lay eggs on leaves. The males, and I know we're going to get into some more of the behavior. You're going to talk about this. The males become caretakers for most of them. I think females are caretakers in some species of them. And then they kind of talk about how the parents will hatch. When these tadpoles hatch, they'll actually jump on the back of the parent, and the parent takes them up the trees, drops them into water holes, and that's really cool behavior.
Yeah, it's called backpacking,
right.
And it's not completely uncommon in the amphibian world, but it is pretty unique. Right. And to the fact that the parents are such good caretakers, both male and females, but typically the backpacking happens with the male. So in general, and even in the mammal world, there's usually, I always jokingly say there's mostly deadbeat dads.
Right.
That they don't all, a lot of them, and I'm generalizing, but a lot of times the fatherly male figure doesn't have much
a lot invested in them, right?
And here we see in these little frogs, the male has a lot invested in, is helping basically bringing the eggs from the leaf litter up to a water source. And typically in the Amazon, because we think of rainforest, they get a lot of rain, and so from the ground they'll take them up into the trees, and they'll find like a flowering plant that has pooled water in it, and then they'll dump the eggs in there, and which is instinctually is just super smart.
And that, I'm reading this and I'm thinking, a lot of people just look at animals and they think they're so stupid. They just think, oh, it's all instinct. It's no emotion, and it's not.
Sure. Well, and Chris, that actually kind of transitions really nicely into the behavior part of reading about poison dart frogs and learning they're actually considered very intelligent for an amphibian type species, and I think that we only know a little bit of the cusp of their intelligence. But in a captive setting, they can recognize their animal keeper within a week, and they've done studies to prove this. That we all know how much we love when our dog comes home and recognizes us and loves us, or from personal experience, my horse definitely nickers when she sees me. And then my cat, I know, knows who I am, and then chooses to turn around.
Right, that's typical cat behavior.
Damn cats.
Unless they're hungry.
So, but we're talking about an amphibian that people don't often think much of, and they're identifying with their caretaker.
And just to jump in real quick, there was a study, or it was a seminar I sat in on fish behavior. Fish learning. I remember this. That just made me think of this study where fish can actually learn how to navigate an obstacle course to get to food.
Oh, yeah.
So they know what wind, like they were swimming down and up and around. And I was amazed that fish learn.
They can target train fish with lasers. And once again, we're just at the cusp. And I'm, of course, a huge behavioral dork. And I think intelligence is so often just thought of primate species. But we're learning more and more. And they think with these poison dart frogs, a lot of they have a lot of brain power, and they think they have really good eyesight. And in order to, they hunt with their tongue, right? And you think of typical frogs using their tongue to catch their insect prey, but they hardly ever miss a strike. And so there's got to be a lot going on up there in their brain to be able to coordinate, to be able to coordinate all that. And then also very interesting, which might be a side of intelligence, is a lot of dart frogs, especially the golden dart frog, which is one of the most poisonous one, which we'll touch on in a little bit. The golden darts, along with some of the other dart frogs, are really social and are more social than a lot of the other amphibians. In a captive setting, they can live in groups of up to 10 sometimes, and in the wild, they've been seen mingling together in groups of like 4 to 7, and they're really rarely aggressive unless it's breeding season or they're fighting over territory. But in general, they're not aggressive with each other, which is also very unique for an amphibian species.
Right.
And of course, they're immune to their own poison. So with the golden dart frogs, they've been seen during breeding season and whatnot, even though the females lay eggs and the males come over and fertilize them, kind of similar to a fish, external fertilization, the males will still kind of stroke and not really groom, but almost like pet and or even mount the female.
Yeah.
So just different behaviors that you wouldn't think you would see with
amphibians.
With amphibians.
I know, it's crazy. This just makes you think like in memory, memory recall and things like that. So 100 years ago, probably thinking, all animals are stupid and it's just all instinct, to today, an deep understanding of, they have very complex social interactions with each other, with their own species,
their offspring,
right, and then caretaking, all the way down to simple things like mating and eating and things like that.
And something along those lines is their communication.
Yeah.
So, we're able to communicate and talk to each other and use our facial expressions. And a lot of wildlife does very similar things. And so, of course, like we talked about earlier, with the chorus of frogs singing in the nighttime or whatever, dart frogs are no different. They use their calls, but they actually incorporate gestures. So I know this from working in the zoo with frogs and toads. But a lot of times when there's sign of dominance, which I think is hilarious, is a push-up movement.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the next time I want to be dominant over somebody, I should just
start doing push-ups.
Drop and give me 10. Yeah. So I wish I could give you 20.
Yeah.
I'd give you about 12 right now.
Ex-military, yeah. Drop and give me 20. I remember that.
And then similar to some of the mammal species or dogs or horses, but a lowered head kind of basically means a little bit more submission. Like, hey, you can have this territory. And their reproduction, you touched on a lot of it in their life cycle, but they are polygynous. And they'll come into these really big breeding groups once or twice a year to breed. And of course, they're the females get to select the most beautiful male, and so that could be some of the evolution of their color too, right? The best and the brightest tend to do better,
right? Looking the healthiest.
So they have a really beautiful courtship call, especially from the males, and it consists of like high pitched squeaks that are pretty rapid. And if you'll bear with me, I think I have an example here. We'll try to play it. This is a dart frog mating call. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, no, that's cool.
It's very distinct. It's like a high-pitched trill.
And
I want my husband to do that the next time he sees me.
Right. I don't think so. After 2 kids, you're like, that's enough of that. No, it's interesting because in the first episode I talk about, there was a few years ago, a scientist came up, I think he was from University of Central Florida, and he was talking about the chorus and the different frequencies of frog song. And I brought it up because I was thinking of all the invasive species we have here in Florida. And he was talking about how they can identify different frequencies to find each other to mate. And so there's high, low, whatever, and probably some frequencies that we can barely hear with human hearing. And I was like, okay, we're mixing all these invasive species. Are they screwing up the frequency calls? Because you can hear something that's not quite the same, but maybe it is, and you go over there, spend all this energy, and for them, they're trying to conserve as much as possible because they're in the wild, and They need to survive. But they spend all this energy, go over there, and they're like, oh my God. And it's a boy, two boy frogs that are totally two different species. And maybe one eats the other, who knows? But that's just the problem. I guess it just kind of highlights the problem of invasive species when we're mixing these animals together that didn't evolve near each other.
Right. We didn't let evolution do its due diligence.
Right.
And it can definitely be a problem. But I think, too, pointing to either their intelligence or their social nature, we touch on a little bit that these poison dart frogs are super dedicated parents. I mean, they almost make me look a little bad.
I know. Yeah, they are.
But in general, they're going to have a clutch of about anywhere from 7 to 10. And in captivity, we know more about their life cycle because we're able to study it. But it's about 13 to 16 days for hatching in a captive setting. And once again, we spoke about this backpacking behavior. Once the tadpoles emerge from their eggs and they stick onto the mucus of their dad, which is a great visual for me.
Yeah, baby wearing.
Yeah, totally. This is like modern baby wearing for sure. You don't even need one of those expensive carriers. But anyways, the dad, they backpack, sticky stick on the back up to the canopy. The males then will still be involved with the care, but interestingly enough, too, is that the tadpoles will feed on like algae and different things and mosquito larvae in this little nursery. But they've also shown that females will lay unfertilized eggs to also offer additional nutrients.
Yeah, which
is incredible.
Right, and it's, understanding biology and understanding nature and how much it takes for her to produce eggs.
Correct.
It's
a big expenditure.
Right. She has to, all those nutrients that she gets from eating, and then she's making eggs, and then she's going around and placing all these eggs for her babies. That's an incredible dedication.
But it gets even crazier.
Yeah.
I mean, the dads are doing a lot, but moms always do more. Right. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Seahorses? I don't know. Maybe we'll do an episode on seahorses. Aren't the dads like it?
Yeah, we should. Yeah. But in general, us moms, but these moms go super out of their way. In fact, research has shown that not only will they lay these unfertilized eggs, but they'll also lace them with trace amounts of the alkoid.
Right.
To feed the tadpoles, which goes to show that this behavior, being introduced to poison at a very young age, perhaps can build their own internal tolerance.
Tolerance to it.
Which researchers still don't know a lot and are just at the cusp of trying to understand how this poison doesn't poison them.
And I was reading a study, too, that talked about how that also gives them a little bit of toxicity. So predators, right?
So, and then just lastly, they reach sexual maturity. It's between 6 and 15 months in captivity. So it takes a while. I mean, they're not rebreeding as quickly as you might think, or with some of the other amphibians.
And in the wild, they live about how long?
In the wild, it's hard, Chris.
Right. They really
I mean, they're small.
Yeah,
Some of these guys are the size of a paperclip.
Right.
But following them around, there's suggestions to about 3 years due to predation, habitat loss, yada yada. But in captivity, they've been shown to live up to 15 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. So that's a long-term investment for somebody that's, has a frog as a pet. Again, going back to that.
Sure, yeah. People forget about that.
Some of the things that, I was looking into, and I had a question, what gives them their toxicity? We knew, and I kind of already knew this, but it's what they eat, right? You are what you eat. So their nutrition, and really they're carnivorous. But they're not eating, cows or stuff like we would, or carnivores or a zebra. They're eating
insect meat.
Right. They're insects and worms.
Which we might be eating too.
Pretty soon. There are people that do eat insects. They're supposedly good for you, but no thank you.
Good source of protein.
Yeah, no, ugh. But we do know that they do produce their toxins from their diets. Correct. Right? Yeah. So that is something we definitely know. We just don't know exactly the mechanisms, how they absorb that in their stomachs and then and convert that to these alkaloid toxins.
And they don't know exactly which species. Is it the ants? Is it the beetles? Right. I believe they're leaning more towards these beetles.
These beetles that they're getting it from, right. So we did say that the golden poison frog is the most deadly. Its name is, bear with me, Phyllobates terribilis.
You did an amazing job on that.
I can pronounce something.
Clap.
Phyllobates terribilis. That's a cool name.
Well, the terribilis comes from terrible.
Right. So it's awful. It it will kill, what we say, up to 10 to 20
10 to 20 men.
human, yeah.
And then I think, just being a math geek, that the basically per dose kill rate for mice that they've shown is enough to kill an elephant.
Oh yeah, it's like,
you might want to cut that part out. But anyways, there's some really cool statistic out there that like they can either kill 10 men or like 2 elephants.
Oh,
2 elephants.
Yeah, that's crazy. So this golden poison frog is located in Colombia, and it has this batrotoxin that really how it works is it prevents nerves from working or firing.
Yeah, paralyzes.
Right,
you for the most
paralyzes
part.
your lungs. You can't breathe, or your heart fails.
Cardiac arrest.
Yeah, and then that's what kills you.
No fun.
So, yeah, no. So the different types of things they eat are this formicin ants, the millipedes, the melrid beetles. Maybe those are the ones that they're thinking that has the toxins in it. Some mites, and then other unknown things. So they're down the leaf litter majority of the time, hunting, trying to eat things, and then they may go up in the trees to. Again, we know during the reproduction part, conservation-wise, again, really, back against the wall with this species. Habitat loss, we've talked about climate change, we've talked about invasive species, we've talked about overexploitation, we've talked about the pet trade's having a big problem on a lot of frog species across the planet, and even poison dart frogs, because they're beautiful. I would never buy one.
No.
I love them. They're gorgeous. I would have an aquarium in my house with poison dart frogs. I would be happy, tickled pink. But I would never do it. No. Go check them out at your local accredited zoo. That has breeding populations. One of the things that I thought was interesting too was UV radiation. With the Earth getting warmer, UV radiation is getting really, really bad for them.
Right. I think with this, the whole climate change thought is that with it getting warmer, they have UV radiation, but then also their eggs need to be in moisture.
Right.
And so with this increase in temperature, I don't know about our listeners out there, but here in Florida, we had a very hot summer and continue to have a very hot fall right now. So the warmer things get and the drier it gets, that is not good. The eggs can't survive that. So there's that. But then also too, Chris, pollution is really big because we've talked a little bit about their skin and how, like you said, their skin breathes and their skin can absorb a lot and they need moisture on their skin. So if the water's polluted or whatnot, they're probably gonna pick that up probably quicker than we would as far as different pollutants and the different water sources.
I've seen videos of South America, like gold mining's a big thing too. And people just dumping mercury. Sure,
a lot of regulation in some of the other countries are different than the regulations we have here in the States, and they may not be as strict, and the waters may or may not be as dirty depending on where they're at, and so these are things that run downstream. And then
I know I sent you that text the other week of that. I think it was Ecuador, and I'll post it and we'll tweet it out. But it was that picture of, it was kind of flooding, but it showed just that trash just flowing. It's a trash river. Yeah. And that's going straight out into the ocean. Again, this is what that Great Pacific Garbage Patch is what contributes. It's not just in the first episode I talked about Asia being a major pollutant, which I know we've documented. South America is another big one. And then for some people coming out and talking about the dangers of plastic. But right. I mean, you look at that. What animal can live in that?
Right. And we're no angels with plastic. I blow through plastic at my house like it's nothing. Like it's water. And I'm really trying to be more conscious about it and buying things in boxes, or obviously definitely recycling, but even trying to make better choices of how to not purchase plastic in the first place.
And that's the thing. Like putting this podcast together, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna put conservation tips out each week, and I've really got to live what I say. It's
Absolutely.
not do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. I am going to do as I say.
Exactly.
I have consciously, turned off power, turned off water when I'm washing dishes. Now, when I go to the stores, I'm trying to avoid buying plastic bottles because that's a big one. Everything's in plastic, Gatorades and water bottles and things like that, and try to use, neoprene or some of these other water bottles that last forever and that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when there wasn't much plastic around. People used to drink out of glass and other things, or now in this day and age, we have tons of reusable water bottles to fill, and there's definitely ways we can try to make a little bit of an impact for
Right,
sure. And,
right.
and anything we can do to help these guys, because frogs and reptiles in general are very sensitive. And once again, if we think of the food chain, if these reptiles or amphibians, let's not use poison dart frogs because nobody wants to eat them because they're poisonous. But just a normal little frog, I mean, that's small. That's lower on the food chain. And so if it's absorbed all these pollutants from its local environment, and then it's eaten by a bird, and then that bird is eaten by a fox, and then that fox is eaten by a whatever, you can just see how
all those chemicals just move up. Right. And it's like, the chemicals that are being leached in the oceans, and we're eating fish. I had salmon last night. I made salmon for dinner. And again, thinking, wow, what's in that
What's
meat?
in here, right.
It's not only, are we worried about, a lot of people worry about hormones in their meats and stuff like that. What about our fish? And we don't consume as much fish in the United States compared to a lot of cultures around the world. Some of the things, when you look at the amphibian levels around Earth, where they really thrive and live, and obviously mostly in the tropics is where these frogs are. So if you look at the richness of diversity, and then you look at extinction rates, or what's going on with endangered species. Let's just use South America as an example of the 2,200 amphibian species they have. They estimate close to 130 have gone extinct already.
130?
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, 130.
Oh my word.
And 400 are endangered or reaching extinction. If you go to Central America, this one's really frightening. Out of the close to 1,100 species of amphibians they've looked at, they estimate 230 have gone extinct, and 350 are endangered, so almost half. Like I said, when you get to that 50% of amphibians are endangered or extinct, this is where this data is coming from. And you look at the trends across Earth, it's the same. I mean, even in North America, where we live, 440 amphibians, 40 extinct, 100 endangered.
Well, and I believe that a lot of the big groups like World Conservation Union or ICUN reported about 1/3 of all amphibian species are currently in decline.
Right.
1 out of 3.
And heading to extinction, yeah, at a rapid pace. And it's not slowing down.
In our lifetime.
Right. And it's not slowing down. This is alarming. Like I think that's kind of our theme is this is scary.
Right.
This is real. This is happening, and we need to do something about it. And you and I, this podcast is one way, and there are thousands of other people. Hopefully we build it to hundreds of thousands, to millions, to billions, to saving the planet. And it's not so much, we need to just do this one little thing. We need to come together to solve a lot of critical issues.
Yeah, and not that we're trying to be all doomsday here, folks. No. We're knowledge is power, and so we know this. There's things we can do. There's things that have been done. Mm-hmm. And to give you a little bit of a feel-good story, and of course my weekly zoo plug is the Puerto Rican crested toad. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about the dart frog in this example, but we're talking about a Puerto Rican crested toad was nearly driven to extinction by humans on the island, and back in 1982. So about 25 years ago or so. And what happened was certain zoos working with the AZA, accredited zoos, caught some up in the wild and began a regulated breeding program called an SSP. Mm-hmm. And they bred these guys, and of course trying to always reduce interbreeding and whatnot. And they were able to release them back into the Puerto Rican protected habitat there. And they've been doing great since. Right. So in the Puerto Rican crested toad, the success story is just one of many that I'm going to touch on. But we're also doing things with the Panama golden frog and the dusky gopher frog, the Houston toad. A lot of those are in conservation enhancement efforts in captivity to move them back into the wild.
One of the ones I looked up was the Mallorcan midwife toad, and that's one where the midwife is the dad taking care of the babies, and not a deadbeat dad again.
Plug for you, yes.
But there are a lot of people out there fighting for these animals, and they're specializing in frogs, and they're bringing them to captivity, through zoos, through research, sound science, keeping these populations intact, and then re-releasing them into the wild.
Mm-hmm. And even the government has taken notice about moving back to poison dart frogs, what we're talking about today. CITES, which helps regulate trade of wildlife, international trade of wildlife and endangered species, they basically have declared the poison dart frog class 2. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that these species aren't, since they're all not threatened, some are threatened, some are highly extinct or endangered, but trade is very much under control and regulated to avoid basically more unwanted extinction. So it's not the there's basically Appendix 1, 2, and 3, and these guys are Appendix 2. So they're in the middle, but there has been note that we need to monitor these guys, whether it's in the pet trade or just
and I think just because they're so I guess one of the words we use a lot is charismatic animals.
Yes,
they're so beautiful and they're just so cool. And like I said, I would love to have an aquarium of them, but I know that is not only illegal, it's wrong. Right, it's wrong. It's selfish and it's wrong that I'm taking these animals from either their habitats or whatnot. So it's. We're bringing the good news, but we're raising the alarm bells too. That I think people need to be aware of what's going on, and I think that kind of helps us lead into an organization to support, especially with amphibians. Oh, absolutely. There's some really good ones out there, and just from a frog point of view, not necessarily dart frog specific, but a really cool organization. I know I have friends that are birders that love to watch birds and also work on migratory birds and report those birds. There's a similar thing called Frog Watch USA. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And you can find it at www.aza.org/frogwatch. And this is a citizen science program through AZA that you can log into, and it can provide individuals and groups and families with cool opportunities to learn about the wetlands in their area, but then also to report on callings of local frogs and toads. And that helps the researchers and the specialists keep somewhat of a population count and a breeding count of what's going on in their area. Yeah, that's a good one. And I, thinking about this, citizen science is where, as a scientist, and I've looked into this too for my own programs, we're trying to get you engaged in the research and actually participating in the research because it's so powerful for us to gather data. And it's fun. Like this is something I do with my boys, like I was saying. And it's a great way to get, off the computer and out into nature. And by nature, I mean walking down the sidewalk that's half lit at nighttime. So it's a way to really get, your hands wet without having to go out and camp. Because I don't really camp. Right. I know you camp. I do. I like the outdoors. But another one, too, that is a little more dart frog specific is there's the Amphibian Survival Alliance. And that's an easy one to find on the internet. That's just www.amphibians.org. And they bring together a lot of world leaders in amphibian conservation and research and specialist groups. And it's very international. They work with over 100 partners around the world. And one of their projects supports poison dart frog conservation. And then even more specifically, if you're a lover of these poison dart frogs and you want to think about how your dollar could directly, or learn more about them, could directly impact them, there's a group called Fundación Pro Aves. Right. That's my Spanish. It's out of Colombia. And it also works with this Amphibian Survival Alliance. But this is a conservation group that has set up, is trying to set up and establish more land for these frogs to live on. Because although they're small, they still need more land than you would think in order to have their natural life cycle and maintain a healthy population. So this group can be found at www.proaves, so that's PROAVES.org. Right. We'll put it in the show notes too. We'll and so that, there's two local guys there in Colombia that are just really dedicated. They're in the field. They're in the field and they're doing it. And there's some really good interviews with them on how they are, hands down helping out hundreds of these animals. And their work should really be applauded and supported. All right. Well, it's just some things. Angie and I have launched a Patreon page. So if you're finding value in this program, please go check that out. We really need your support and help spread the word on the show. And I think it's something Angie and I are really dedicated to. And we are going to be here each week with the new species.
Yeah, and on the Patreon page too, you'll also be able to find other clips and interviews and some other fun side projects we have going on that will hopefully enhance your listening experience.
Right. And we just, again, we just want to build a community and get the word out, because I think that's what really needs to be done here. So thank you for spending an hour with us.
Yes, I hope you learned a lot. I know I learned a lot, and we would love any feedback.
Right.
Or
Please.
share your story with us if you've worked with any of these animals or know of other groups that I'm not aware of, maybe more local and within the community, within your community. We would love to share that, because we want to be a networking based group where we can learn and share from each other, because there's probably a lot of things that are going on that are more positive that we don't know about. So we definitely, of course.
Please visit the website, our Facebook account, Twitter, tweet us, get a hold of us through social media. But yeah, we would love to keep developing this community.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Listen, learn, share. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.